Yamada was a clueless antisocial loser who wasted his life grinding on video games. However, everything changed when he fell in love with a depressed gamer girl. Now he would do anything to riz her up. Everything started the day Kino's boyfriend, Takuma, broke up with her after admitting that he'd been oiling another girl's engine. Heartbroken, Kino returned home and decided to play her favorite game, Forest of Survivor, which she played with Takuma. At some point, she ran into a player named Yamada, one of the best players in the game, and she tried to vent her anger by telling him everything that happened with her ex. Unfortunately, the bored-looking elf wasn't interested, and when Kino realized that he wouldn't be her unpaid therapist, she got pissed and cursed him before logging out. Later, she received a notification about the game's upcoming first anniversary event and decided to attend it to see Takuma's new girlfriend. The next day at school, she invited her best friend, Momoko, to go shopping with her so she could look bussin' and make Takuma regret losing her. Momoko teased her for this, but still agreed, so after school, they went to the mall, where Kino underwent a complete makeover. On the day of the event, she arrived there looking like a supposed snack, and saw Takuma with his new chick. When she attempted to follow them, she bumped into someone and fell so hard that her shoe came off. As she sat on the ground, feeling ashamed, the voice of the guy she bumped into pulled her out of her self-pity. When she turned to look at him, she was immediately awestruck by how handsome he was, but thankfully didn't start drooling over the guy. After standing up and putting her shoe back on, she apologized and tried to explain herself. However, the guy wasn't interested, and as he began walking away, Kino was hit with a sudden sense of déjà vu of her conversation with Yamada. Immediately, she called him by Yamada's name, so he turned back to ask who she was. Kino tried to explain, but the sound of Takuma's voice behind her made her stop. She tried acting surprised when she turned to look at him, but the guy ignored her like she was the terms and conditions and went straight to gushing over Yamada. Yamada was actually a very popular gamer, and Takuma had been his fan for as long as he could remember. Kino didn't like being sidelined, so she inserted herself in the convo and acted like Yamada was her new bae. Yamada tried to deny it, but she pulled him aside and promised to give him the rare item pin code she got for attending the event if he played alone. The gamer and Yamada couldn't resist the offer, so he agreed and went along with her improvised play. Takuma was in disbelief because he couldn't understand how a gaming noob like Kino had managed to meet and get with his idol when he never gained as much as a like on the comments he left under his videos. His girlfriend began consoling him, and as Kino watched them, she realized how easily this new chick replaced her. Hours later, she sat opposite Yamada in a restaurant and talked his ears off because she wouldn't shut up about her ex. Eventually, she shifted the topic to Yamada and, after asking questions about him, advised him to loosen up a bit if he ever wanted to get a girlfriend. Yamada told her he didn't care about being in a relationship because he liked his life drama-free, and even though Kino was surprised, she agreed that being single wasn't that bad. Eventually, she excused herself to go to the bathroom, and just as she finished washing her hands, she noticed her clothes were dirty and that she'd scraped her ankle from her earlier fall. When she returned to the restaurant, she was surprised to find Yamada wasn't there and thought he had left her, too. However, he returned just then, and she couldn't hide the relief she felt when she saw him. Yamada asked her to sit down and pulled out the band-aids he'd left to buy because he'd noticed the scrape on her ankle. His kind gesture made Kino feel grateful, but since the entire day had been an emotional roller coaster for her, she burst into tears and pleaded with him to have more drinks with her, which was a bad idea. She woke up in his room the next morning with a hangover and fell out of his bed in shock. It wasn't surprising that her initial thought was that they had slept together, but Yamada assured her that he hadn't touched her. He explained that he decided to bring her back to his place after she passed out drunk at the restaurant because he didn't know where she lived. Embarrassed, she apologized and thanked him for looking after her. When she got up to leave, he told her that he'd washed her shirt and hung it in the bathroom because she'd puked on it. Kino's embarrassment increased after hearing this, but it only worsened when he told her he'd paid the bill, so she promised to pay him back. A little while later, he bid her farewell, saying he hoped they never cross paths again, and the embarrassed Kino walked home, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. Soon after she got home, she took a bath, and while relaxing on her bed later, she discovered that her necklace was missing. Quickly, she jumped out of bed to search for it, and when she couldn't find it, she figured she'd left it in Yamada's room. Since she didn't have his contact, she logged into Forest of Survivor and was disappointed to see that he wasn't online. Tears soon began forming in her eyes, as she couldn't bear the thought of losing the necklace, which was the first gift Takuma gave her when they started dating. Just then, Rurahime, her guild's guild master, noticed her character was standing motionless, so she chatted Kino up, asking if she was okay. Kino admitted to Rurahime that she had a lot going on in real life, so Rurahime offered to listen to her rant. While they were chatting about her heartbreak and the loss of her necklace, Yamada logged in. So Kino quickly messaged him to ask about her necklace. Yamada told her he hadn't seen it, which made her wonder if she'd lost it at the restaurant. Rurihime then invited Yamada to join her and Kino to discuss the matters of the heart, but he told her he turned her down. He also drew her attention to their overflowing storage chest and told her to do something about it, since he was tired of clearing out all the junk. Rurihime scolded him for calling the items junk and said they had probably been put there by a rookie who wanted to help. Yamada pointed out that anyone with a functioning brain would know that those items were even more useless than Sakura, and it was at that point that Kino tuned into their chat. She was the one who had been putting the stuff in the chest, and Yamada's harsh comment made her feel stupid. However, she still admitted she was the one responsible, so Yamada gave her a piece of his mind. His words were so harsh that Kino couldn't stand them and logged out. Seeing this, Rurihime began scolding Yamada, but the nonchalant boy wasn't in the mood to be lectured, so he logged out as well. When he stood up from his gaming chair, he stepped on something, and when he checked, he saw it was Kino's necklace. Later in the week, Kino and Momoko had lunch together, and as they chatted, Kino brought up her missing necklace. Momoko couldn't understand why Kino wanted to find the necklace and asked when she would finally get over her low-budget Playboy ex. Kino swore that she was over him, but Momoko pointed out that if she were, she wouldn't be hung up over the missing necklace. A little while later, as Kino walked through the train station on her way home, she spotted a guy standing with two girls. From what she heard, she realized that one of the girls was about to confess and recalled her failed confession from the past. Just as she was about to walk away, the guy spoke up, and that was when she realized that it was Yamada. He told the girls they were wasting his time and advised them to gather their thoughts before approaching him next time. As he began walking away, Kino screamed at him to stop, so he turned and looked at her in confusion. Realizing that he couldn't recognize her, she quickly reminded him of who she was and asked why he'd been so harsh to the girls when one of them had only wanted to confess to him. Not surprisingly, the dense guy hadn't realized he was about to be confessed to, so Kino told him he needed a crash course in human interaction. The two then began walking, and as Kino asked him questions, he suddenly stopped and handed her his broken necklace. He apologized for breaking it, but Kino told him not to worry as she wanted to throw the necklace away before. When they got outside, it was raining, but Kino said goodbye to Yamada and dashed home. After watching her for a few seconds, Yamada went after her and offered his umbrella to her before running home in the rain. The following day, as Kino lay in bed, staring at her broken necklace, someone rang her doorbell, so she rushed to answer. To her surprise and horror, her mother had sent her all the stuff she left at home after she moved out because she wanted to turn her room into a home gym. She quickly called Momoko over to help her sort things out, and Momoko advised her to throw everything away. Kino didn't want to, but Momoko didn't give her a chance to object, and when they finished gathering everything into trash bags, Momoko spotted the broken necklace and umbrella. She told Kino to get rid of them, too, but the sentimental girl tried to refuse until she remembered what Yamada said about knowing when something was useless or not. After they threw out everything except her teddy bear, Momoko noticed Kino looked depressed, so she suggested they get some barbecue and booze to cheer her up. Later that same night, both girls showed up at Yamada's apartment because Kino wanted to return Yamada's umbrella. Momoko was beyond drunk and started hitting on Yamada since he was a hunk. Yamada found this annoying, but the drunk girl didn't care, so he turned to Kino. Kino told him that returning the umbrella was just an excuse, as her real mission was to thank him for saving her from complete embarrassment at the event the other day. Once he accepted her thanks, she pulled Momoko off him and began walking away, but Yamada called out to her. He asked her to log into the game when she had some free time so she could put Rurihime's mind at ease. Kino smiled in response and promised to log in as soon as she got home. Days later, Momoko and Kino went on a group date with Momoko and two guys. Kino wasn't enjoying the evening because her date was boring and had as much riz as a shut-in loser. When she signaled to Momoko that she wanted to leave, Momoko signaled back that she wasn't allowed to ditch her, so Kino resolved to play with her phone instead. Seeing this, her date tried to score points by talking about games, since he was into mobile games. Kino explained that the game she was into wasn't a mobile game, and when she told him about Forest of Savior, the guy's brain began refreshing like a web page. When the date ended later, Kino and Momoko walked back home together, and Momoko complained about Kino using her phone the entire time. Kino apologized and explained that she couldn't resist texting Rurihime back. Since Momoko had no idea who Rurihime was, Kino revealed that they were guildmates and even showed her pictures of Rurihime's avatar. Momoko asked how sure she was that Rurihime wasn't some old creeper pretending to be a girl, since people could be anything on the net. Kino defended Rurihime and assured her that Rurihime was truly a girl. Momoko didn't argue, but she still pointed out how wrong it was to exchange contact information with someone she'd never seen before. She then bid Kino farewell, leaving her words hanging over her head like an execution axe. So as Kino began walking towards her neighborhood, she kept thinking about Rurihime. A little while later, she arrived at home and immediately logged into the game. only to be disappointed when she didn't see anyone else online. Just as she was about to log out, she noticed Rurihime and Yamada working on potions outside. They hadn't noticed her login notification because they were busy chatting, and instead of joining in, Kino chose just to read their chats. The majority of their conversations sounded like they were flirting, and it made her wonder if they were a couple. Before she could finish, Yamada noticed she was online and told Rurihime. Rurihime immediately welcomed Kino, and as they began chatting, Yamada told them he was logging out. Rurihime bid him farewell and promised to call him later, leading Kino to believe they were truly together. She couldn't stop thinking about it, and the next day at school, she considered doing a deep dive into the web to find more information about Rurihime and Yamada. On her way home later, she bumped into the guy from the group date, and they started chatting. Well, he was the one talking, trying to redeem himself after failing the gaming community the night before. Kino didn't care about what he said, but since he was geeking out about games, she asked if he knew who Yamada was. Not surprisingly, the clueless noob didn't know, and Kino became even more disappointed in him. When they finally reached the station, Kino was distracted by a girl who reminded her of Rurihime. Curious, she kept her eyes on her and was shocked when the girl walked up to Yamada. The more she watched them, the more convinced she was that the girl was Rurihime and that she was dating Yamada. When the guy she was with noticed that she was lost in thought, he called her attention, but she told him she had to leave and rushed off. Later, when she got home, she received a text from Rurihime, inviting her to a Forest of Savior-themed cafe opening the next month. She said she'd met Yamada earlier that day and he'd agreed to visit the place with her. That piece of information convinced her that the girl she saw with Yamada earlier was Rurihime, and it made her feel some way. However, she didn't try to confirm it with Rurihime and only texted back that she would attend the cafe opening. The month flew by in a flash, and the day of the cafe hangout came. Kino woke up earlier to get ready and even got a text from Rurihime reminding her of their plans. While she was on the train later, she texted Momoko, and her friend expressed her disagreement with her decision to meet up with her guildmates. She said for all Kino knew, they could be luring her to a secluded place to unalive her, but Kino defended them. She also reminded her that Yamada would be there, and that was enough to make Momoko drop the whole murder thing. A little while later, Kino walked out of the station and began trying to locate the cafe, but since she was no better than Zoro, even with a map, she still couldn't find her way. Just as she was about to lose hope, a guy named Ada accidentally bumped into her, and she dropped her phone. Ada apologized for his clumsiness, and when he bent to pick up her phone, he noticed the pin location on the map. Curious, he asked if that was where she was headed, and once Kino confirmed it, he offered to show her the way since he was also heading there. Kino readily accepted his offer, but her mind kept screaming stranger danger as they walked. On the other hand, Ada seemed to be a nice guy, and he began talking to her about games, even asking for her opinion on the Forest of Savior game. Kino gave him her honest review, and as she spoke more, she told him about the time Yamada scolded her for putting useless items in the guild's storage chest. As soon as Ada heard this story, he gave her a curious look, but before he could say what was on his mind, someone called out to him. Looking around, they spotted Rurihime standing in front of the cafe with Yamada and a half-pint man, and Kino finally breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, she was so happy that she crossed the street to meet them and began talking excitedly to Yamada. Just then, Rurihime came to join them, but she stared Kino down as she possessively held onto Yamada's shirt. The wannabe Wednesday Addams scared Kino a bit, but she still maintained her composure and greeted Rurihime nicely. In response, Rurihime rudely asked Ada who Kino was, and the bespectacled Prince Charming announced that Kino was a member of their guild, which surprised her. Eventually, their little party of 5 got a table inside the cafe, and Ada and Komoda, the small man, began discussing what they wanted to get. Kino took her time observing them, and since she didn't know them, she asked Rurihime who they were. Rurihime responded rudely, but Kino didn't mind and kept asking questions, which ultimately made Rurihime lose her cool. She angrily demanded to know why Kino kept calling her Rurihime when that wasn't her avatar's name, and Kino was left shocked. However, before she could ask for a proper explanation, Yamada spoke up, suggesting that everyone introduce themselves. Ada happily took the lead and, during his introduction, revealed that his avatar was Rurihime. His words shocked Kino so much that she didn't even realize when the word nekama, which was slang for guys who pretended to be female online, slipped out of her mouth. Ada argued that he was no nekama and said he was the same as his avatar, even though they looked different. Kino told him that he was being delusional and accused him of catfishing her, but Ada denied it. Bro legit said the one she'd exchanged contact with and confided in was Rurihime, not him, so her secrets were safe. After he said this, Kino became convinced that all his brain screws were loose, so she slumped back into her chair and kept quiet so Komoda could speak. The little man told her that they had never met in-game because he spent most of his time in the dungeon. When he finished his introduction, He introduced the not Rurihime as Ida's younger sister, Runa. He said she looked so much like Rurihime because Ida had designed his avatar based on her. Runa just kept staring daggers at Kino, refusing to comment until Komoda said Kino and Yamada were acquainted. She rudely asked how that was possible, so Kino explained that they had met at an event, which made Runa glare at her even more. Seeing this, Kino decided not to speak to her again and began talking to Yamada instead. She admitted she'd assumed he was dating Rurihime because of how they always interacted. Yamada explained that, as Ada's junior, he was socially obligated to do whatever Ada wanted and go along with whatever he did. Kino sympathized with the traumatized guy and told him that her assumption had made her believe he'd lied about his dating history. Yamada suddenly became more serious and said he'd never lie about something like that, prompting Kino to express relief. Yamada didn't hear what she'd said, but Runa did, and the entitled brat wasn't happy about it, so she asked Kino if she was in love with Yamada. Ada immediately put his hand over his sister's mouth and apologized to Kino on her behalf. His words just pissed Runa off even more, so she cursed her brother out and told him to mind his damn business. On the other hand, Kino had been rattled by Runa's unexpected question, so she tried to drink some water. However, she accidentally dropped the glass in a panic when she noticed Yamada was staring at her. Horrified, she tried to clean up the mess she made. But Yamada stopped her and told her to leave it for the staff. Unable to look him in the eyes, Kino turned away and refused to get up until Yamada excused himself to make a phone call. Ada also left the table, so Komoda began making small talk with Kino to help her loosen up a bit. He told her that all four of them used to play another game before, but began playing Forest of Savior because Ada convinced them to. He also explained that she had never met Runa before because the girl rarely logged into the game. When he began telling her how excited Ada had been to meet her in real life, Runa cut him off and accused Kino of trying to seduce Ada, as she had done to Yamada. Meanwhile, Ada and Yamada were seated outside, and Ada confronted Yamada about faking a phone call to leave the cafe. Yamada explained that he'd done it because he assumed Kino wanted him gone. Ada expected this response, so he called Yamada a dense idiot and pointed out that Kino had reacted that way because she'd been embarrassed. Yamada was genuinely surprised by this, as he couldn't understand why Kino would feel embarrassed, and Ada decided it wasn't his place to teach Yamada about the complexity of women. He moved on to another topic and told Yamada that he had done a poor job of describing Kino to him. Yamada didn't see how that was possible and argued that he hadn't made a mistake. This made Ada realize that Yamada needed more than a crash course in women, so he advised him to stop acting like a try-hard emo and start paying closer attention to everyone around him. A little while later, the group stood outside the cafe after having finished their get-together. While Kino talked to Ada and Yamada, Runa stood beside Komoda, continuing to hate on her. When she told the little man that Kino was for the streets, he was shocked, but still scolded her for saying such a thing when she didn't know anything about Kino. Despite this, Runa stood her ground and swore that she would make Kino leave their guild and their friend group before Ada and Yamada became complete simps for her. Eventually, they all went their separate ways, but Kino and Yamada took the same train. After they got off the train, Yamada stopped by the convenience store to buy some pudding, which he planned to eat for dinner. Kino disliked his food choice, so she asked him to sit on a bench and wait for her while she ran home to get him some proper food. When she returned, Yamada was dozing off, so she set down the things she had brought beside him and apologized for keeping him waiting. Yamada didn't want to accept the food, but Kino managed to convince him to take it. Suddenly, her phone rang, so she moved away to answer it and was surprised to learn that it was Runa on the other end. The younger girl said she'd gotten her number from her brother because she wanted to apologize for her rude behavior and asked Kino for a second chance. Kino was ecstatic about becoming friends with Runa, so when Runa proposed an outing for next Saturday, she happily agreed. After getting off the phone, Kino told Yamada about the planned outing, and the boy wished her well. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was up, so when he got home later, he checked his calendar. Just as he'd suspected, he saw that he was supposed to tutor Runa on the same day she asked to meet with Kino, and wondered if Kino had mixed up the dates. Days later, it was Saturday, but to Kino's horror and confusion, the person who showed up for her hangout with Runa was a sus guy who kept calling her Rurihime. Try as she couldn't convince him that she wasn't Rurihime, and it made her unforgettable. Just as she contemplated calling Runa, Runa texted her, saying she was running late and had sent her online friend to keep Kino company for the time being. Sadly, Kino believed this and only panicked because she didn't want to be in the same space as the guy. So she excused herself to go to the bathroom and call Runa. Speaking of Runa, she was at home with Yamada, who had just arrived to tutor her, and she seemed pleased with herself. Curious, Yamada asked Runa if she'd made other plans for that day, and Runa told him that she hadn't. At that moment, Kino's call came in, so she quickly declined it to prevent Yamada from seeing the caller's name. Back in the public restroom, Kino became worried when Runa didn't pick up, and even more so when the sus guy Runa sent began knocking on the door of her stall. When she didn't respond to the guy, he started trying to force the door open, and Kino wondered if she'd make the evening headlines. Meanwhile, Yamada had coaxed the truth out of Runa, and when he asked where she'd met the guy she sent in her place, she told him it was through Ida's account. It turned out that the guy was one of Ruriheme's diehard fans, and Runa had tricked him into believing he would meet the person behind Ruriheme's account. Yamada quickly got up and tried to leave, but bumped into Eita, who was bringing them snacks. Eita attempted to make a joke like he usually did, but when he noticed the two in the room looked serious, he asked what the issue was. After Yamada explained what Runa had done, Eita logged into his account and confirmed that Runa had indeed messaged the guy from it. On the other hand, Runa was busy sulking and looking at pictures of herself with the boys in Komoda. As far as she was concerned, she hadn't done anything wrong, and their guild was better off with just the four of them. A panicked Komoda, who had been told that Kino was kidnapped, arrived shortly after the boys confirmed the meeting location. Seeing him, the boys told him to calm down and drive them to the place, assuring him that Kino was fine. Once they were all seated in his van, Komoda zoomed off with more speed than the Flash had in his body. Yamada tried to get him to slow down, but he didn't listen, and as they kept going, Eita decided it was time to lecture Runa. He told her that her nasty attitude was the reason she had no friends, and Runa argued that she had plenty of online friends. Eita pointed out that it didn't matter, but Runa swore that it did and asked why they were all hung up on Kino anyway. Eita responded by asking if Kino had tried to befriend her at any point, and Runa suddenly stopped speaking to him. Eventually, they arrived at the location, and as they tried to figure out which way to go, Yamada spotted them. Komoda immediately rushed towards them and began threatening to have the guy locked up, which confused them. It wasn't until Eita and Yamada arrived and explained who the guy was that Kino understood why Komoda acted that way. When Yamada noticed her leg was bandaged, he asked what happened, and the guy claimed responsibility. He explained that she'd gotten hurt when he went to check on her in the restroom, and that was when Eita lost it. He grabbed the guy's tie and demanded to know why he'd gone into the women's bathroom in the first place. The guy answered that he'd gone in to check on her because she was taking too long, and since Kino hadn't been expecting him, she got spooked and hit her knee on the toilet seat. His explanation pissed Eita off even more, so he began scolding and lecturing the guy on social and moral conduct. However, the guy saw it as rude, and they started arguing over who was right and who was wrong. Deciding not to butt in, Kino turned to Yamada, who apologized for not telling her that Runa had a tutoring session with him that day. As expected, Kino didn't get angry that Runa had deceived her and chose to gaslight herself into believing that it was an honest mistake. On the other hand, Runa, who had refused to even come close to the table from the start, ran off when she finally felt guilty and didn't like it. Kino tried to go after her, but her injured leg hindered her, and when she cried out in pain, Runa circled back to check on her. Just then, Eita noticed her and asked her to follow him, saying she was due for another round of scolding, but she didn't want to go. She turned to Yamada, hoping he'd defend her, but he told her it was time to dance to the tune of her own music. As Eita began dragging Runa away, Kino suddenly cried out in pain, claiming that her stomach was hurting. She pleaded with Eita to get her some pain medication and even convinced Komoda and Yamada to accompany him. As for her unwanted date, she told him to get lost before he ended up in jail. When she was finally alone with Runa, she dropped the act and began talking to Runa about the game. Runa found this odd, and when she couldn't take it anymore, she lashed out, demanding to know why Kino was being nice to her after what happened. She even admitted that she'd set the whole thing up because she hated Kino and wanted her to leave their guild. Kino didn't know what to say to this, but when she recalled how Runa had rushed to her side earlier, she told Runa that she'd leave all the scolding to Eita. She then told Runa she really wanted to be friends with her, which made the younger girl cry. She couldn't understand how Kino could forgive her so easily and apologize for everything she'd done to her. When the guys returned a few minutes later, they found Kino comforting Runa but didn't ask any questions. Since they were now friends, Runa visited Kino later that week, and as they played their game, Momoko sat opposite them, complaining that she was tired of being single. At some point, she realized she was speaking to herself and started another round of complaints. Kino explained that Runa was hanging out with her because things between her and Eita were still tense, and she wanted to avoid him for now. Momoko argued that if Runa wished to avoid her brother, she could go hang out with underdeveloped humans like her. Hearing this annoyed Runa since she didn't have any friends, so she told Momoko that she was single because no one wanted to be with a bitter old hag. In response, Momoko threatened to smack some sense into her, and Runa sought refuge with Kino, who gave her a bag of chips as a bribe. Kino then returned to playing her game, and Momoko took the opportunity to ask her about Yamada. She was desperately shipping them, so she wanted to know how Kino felt about him and vice versa. Kino explained that she and Yamada were just friends and nothing more. When she mentioned that he'd been teaching her how to level up in the game, Runa said it was because he was cursed to be selfless. She told them that he was still tutoring her, even though he was preparing for his upcoming entrance exam. Hearing Runa say this made Momoko realize that she'd been interrogating the wrong person, so she switched lanes and began questioning Runa instead. Kino ignored the two gossip girls as she continued playing her game, and then she was notified that Yamada had logged in. She immediately chatted him up, proudly telling him how much she'd leveled up and even showing off her upgraded shoes. Yamada told her she'd used the raw materials to upgrade her shoes, which bummed Kino out since she'd spent a lot of gems on the upgrade. Surprisingly, Yamada offered to give her his spare shoes, but she refused to take them. She insisted that she would earn more gems and upgrade her boots with the right materials herself. Impressed by her dedication, Yamada wished her luck, and when Kino saw that he'd added an emoji to the message, she was shocked. As she sat trying to figure out if he'd been body snatched, Momoko tackled her and told her to forget about the stupid game. Kino managed to free herself from Momoko's grasp and return to her laptop, but it suddenly short-circuited. Later that day, Runa swallowed her pride and spoke to Ada about Kino's laptop, asking if there was something he could do. Ada figured it was the game's latest update that fried the laptop circuit, which made Runa sad because she knew Kino was too broke to buy a new one. The next day, while Kino was trying and failing to read, Runa and Yamada paid her a surprise visit. It turned out that after Runa talked to Ada, he called Yamada and asked him to drop by Kino's place after tutoring Runa to check on the laptop. Yamada's initial thought had been to refuse, but when he recalled his chat with Kino about upgrading her shoes, he changed his mind. Runa had only accompanied him because he didn't know the way, and after Kino let them in, Yamada told her not to get her hopes up that he could fix her laptop. Kino already knew this, but was grateful to him nonetheless, so she excused herself to get them some snacks. While she was in the kitchen, Runs came to her and informed her that her plot covers were hanging in the room where Yamada could see them. Kino quickly rushed back into the room to remove her precious garments, and only after she'd safely deposited them in her laundry basket did she relax. After bringing out the snacks and pouring juice for them, she asked if they would like lunch, and they said they would. Yamada even admitted that he was looking forward to eating her cooking again because he'd enjoyed the curry she gave him the other day. This made her smile, and when Runa noticed it, she wondered what was going on between the two, so she secretly took a photo of them and sent it to Ada. Ada texted back immediately and suggested that Runa do something to set their romantic ship sailing. Runa told him she didn't know what to do, so Ada advised her to create instances that would push Kino and Yamada together. His exact words were to create a rom-com situation, but Runa's methods were questionable to say the least. The first thing she did was push Kino towards Yamada, hoping he would catch her and they would have a romantic moment. However, things didn't play out that way as Kino's hair clip poked Yamada's face. Worried that she destroyed his K-pop idol look, Kino grabbed Yamada's face to inspect it. She didn't even realize how close they were until Yamada spoke up and asked her to move away. Kino pulled away and began to feel bad, since she believed her behavior had angered Yamada, so she apologized. She also made Runa apologize for pushing her, and Yamada assured them that he was not angry. He then got up, told them he had to pop back home to grab a few items he needed to fix Kino's laptop, and rushed out without saying another word. His behavior prompted Runa to say he was acting sus, but Kino believed he was trying to hide his anger toward them. A few hours later, Yamada returned to Kino's apartment and was surprised to find both girls fast asleep. They had left a plate of food on the table for him, but Yamada didn't touch it. Instead, he tried to work on the laptop as quietly as possible so he wouldn't wake the girls, but his tools weren't in sync. One of the screwdrivers fell and rolled towards sleeping Beauty A, but thankfully, she didn't wake up. Yamada quickly grabbed the runaway tool, but instead of returning to his workstation, he kept staring at the sleeping Kino. When he noticed that she'd clipped her hair back up, he subconsciously removed the clip, letting her hair fall and envelop her face. He was still committing her image to his mental vault when the doorbell rang, pulling him back to reality. When he went to answer it, he was surprised to find Takuma standing at the door. Takuma was also shocked to see Yamada, since he'd been sure Kino had lied about her relationship with the gamer boy. However, he got over the shock and explained that he'd come over to return the container Kino had used to package food for him while they were still dating. In other words, he came by to see if Kino was miserable without him, and Yamada assured him that Kino was thriving. Realizing how shameless he was being, Takuma handed the containers over to Yamada and pleaded with him not tell Kino that he dropped by. He said if she asked where the containers came from, Yamada should tell her that he found them next to the door. Moments after Takuma left, Kino opened the door, catching Yamada off guard. So he quickly told her the lie that Takuma asked him to tell her about the containers. Kino laughed when Yamada finished speaking, making it evident that she'd overheard his discussion with her shameless ex. After they went back inside, Yamada returned Kino's hair clip, which he still had for some reason. Out of curiosity, Kino asked why he removed it in the first place, and he admitted he'd done it on impulse. His response woke the butterflies in Kino's belly, but she managed to keep her calm. The following week or so, Kino applied for a part-time job at a convenience store close to her house. On her way home after the interview, she called Momoko and told her she'd gotten the job. Momoko asked why she applied for the job when she wasn't pressed for cash, and Kino explained that she wanted to repay Yamada and Ida. Granted, they hadn't charged her for helping fix her laptop, but Kino felt uncomfortable accepting freebies, which was why she got the job. Momoko understood what she meant, so she wished her luck and hung up the phone to return to her group date. When Kino returned home later, she logged into the Forest of Survivor game and began chatting with Rurihime. As they spoke, Rory introduced her to Komoda's avatar, a tiny floating creature resembling a sheep. Kino was surprised by its size but happy to finally see him in-game. She then told Ruri, or rather Ada, that she wanted to repay him for providing the spare parts for her laptop. Ada told her she didn't have to repay him, claiming he had no use for the parts he gave her. But Kino insisted he accept some form of payment. To appease her, Ada agreed but said he wanted her to repay him by helping him and Komoda with the plans they had been discussing when she logged in. During this time, Yamada was at school, and everyone was busy preparing for their upcoming school festival. When Yamada went out to throw away the trash, a group of girls in his fan club began gushing over him from afar. As usual, he ignored them and was saved from having to interact with them when one of his male classmates walked up to him. The guy wanted Yamada to join the pageant competition during the festival, but Yamada told him that he wasn't interested. After they deposited the trash at the trash site, someone called out to Yamada from the window, telling him that his phone was ringing. By the time Yamada got to class, the phone wasn't ringing anymore and was sitting pretty on a towel on top of his desk. Tsubaki, his desk neighbor, told him she'd put the towel under his phone because the vibration was annoying. Yamada apologized for the inconvenience and returned her towel, but Tsubaki wasn't done speaking with him. She brought up his stream from the night before and began criticizing his gameplay, saying he'd become sloppy. According to her, he was losing his edge for shooting games because he'd been playing Forest of Survivor, but Yamada disagreed. When he attempted to explain what happened, she cut him off, saying he was making up excuses. Realizing he couldn't change her opinion, Yamada turned his attention to his phone, which had a message from Ada. He wanted Yamada to acquire tickets for his school festival for all of them because, apparently, Kino had agreed to sponsor them. Later that week, Kino, Runa, and Komoda met outside Yamada's school to attend the festival. They were supposed to link up with Ada, who was already there, but when they saw how he was dressed, they decided to ignore him. As they began walking around, Kino asked Runa if she wanted to eat anything, and Runa said she didn't. Kino was surprised to hear this, as Runa was a certified foodie, so Komoda explained that the younger girl was worried. It turned out she would take the school's entrance exam the following year, and the idea of being there made her feel a little nervous. Understanding dawned on Kino, so she tried to help Runa relax with a pep talk. Komoda also added his 2 bits, but nothing they said changed the way Runa was feeling. They eventually accepted Ada, and as they explored the different attractions, Runa told Kino that her stomach hurt. Kino offered to escort her to the bathroom, and while she waited for Runa to finish, she got a text from Ada. He said they would reconvene outside in 15 minutes, so she considered texting Yamada to ask where he was, but decided against it. Just then, she spotted him helping his classmates carry some boxes that had fallen by their class door. When they disappeared into the classroom, she returned her attention to Runa, becoming worried that the girl was taking forever. Before she could decide whether or not to go into the bathroom and look for Runa, Yamada appeared behind her. Sensing his presence, Kino turned around and asked where he'd come from all of a sudden. Yamada explained that he'd spotted her a while ago, but because of the thing with the boxes, he'd gotten distracted. Hearing that he'd noticed her first made Kino smile like an idiot, and when Yamada asked what was up with her face, she ignored the question. Instead, she told him to wait while she went to check on Runa, and didn't notice that Tsubaki was watching them as she moved away. Later on, Kino, Yamada, and Runa went to the nurse's office because Runa's stomachache had gotten worse. However, Runa snatched Yamada's phone away and pleaded with them not to let Ada know where she was. She said that if he found out, he would force her to go home, and she hadn't enjoyed the festival yet. Since they couldn't say no to her, Kino promised they wouldn't tell and asked what she wanted them to get for her. Runa happily placed her order, and then the two left to get everything. As they walked through the hallway, Kino noticed that all eyes were on them and began to feel uncomfortable. Yamada soon bumped into his physical education teacher, and when the man saw him with Kino, he started teasing him. He was convinced Kino was Yamada's girlfriend and even congratulated the boy for batting himself a baddie. After the man walked away, some girls approached them and asked if they were truly dating. Kino assured them that they were just friends, not the kind with benefits, but that only made the girls ask more questions. When Kino and Yamada finally managed to get outside, Kino collapsed on a bench, exhausted from answering all those questions. When Ada and Komoda arrived, Ada burst into laughter, and revealed that Runa had experienced the same thing when she attended the festival last year. He then jokingly suggested that Kino and Yamada start dating, which made Kino shy and embarrassed. Yamada, on the other hand, said nothing, so Kino excused herself. Ada tried to follow her and apologize for his insensitive statement, but Yamada rushed past him before he could even move. Unaware of this, Kino walked into the school building, her mind racing over what had just happened. Eventually, she noticed Yamada was following her, but because she was still feeling embarrassed, she refused to stop. As she sped up, she bumped into Tsubaki. So she apologized and rushed off before the girl could ask if she was okay. When Tsubaki saw Yamada, she tried asking if he knew what was wrong, but he told her he couldn't talk. He then called out to Kino, causing her to freeze in place, and when she turned to face him, Tsubaki took it as his cue to leave. When Yamada arrived at where Kino was, he apologized for what had happened outside, but Kino wasn't thinking about it anymore. She pointed out that it was the first time he called her by her name since they met, but Yamada disagreed. Kino swore it was true, and as she tried to explain her point, she noticed people were staring at them again. Without thinking, she grabbed Yamada's hand and ran upstairs to the door of the rooftop. There, she apologized for dragging him, and Yamada apologized again for what happened outside. Kino told him that she wasn't angry about the incident and explained that she ran off because she was embarrassed by the whole thing. As expected, Yamada didn't understand why, and when he asked, Kino refused to tell him anything. Yamada decided not to press her for answers and started walking away, but Kino called out to him to stop. She then asked what his response would have been if she agreed to take Ada's suggestion seriously. Yamada didn't immediately respond as he tried to think of the best way to answer her. When he finally gathered his thoughts, Kino panicked and tried to pass her question off as a joke. As she began walking downstairs, Yamada surprised her by saying he would have felt honored if she had taken Ida's suggestion seriously. According to him, he was way out of her league, and the thought of her even considering him as a partner was surprising to say the least. His words gave Kino whiplash because she hadn't expected him to put himself down like that. However, she didn't try to argue and quietly followed him to get the things Runa had requested. Days later, Yamada stopped by Kino's workplace to buy something since she insisted that he should drop by while they were gaming the night before. When she finished ringing up his items, she asked him to wait while she clocked out. Yamada agreed, and while he waited, Kino's older coworker asked Kino if Yamada was her boyfriend. Kino told the woman that they were just friends, but the woman was convinced that Kino liked Yamada more than a friend. Surprisingly, Kino admitted she wasn't sure how she truly felt about Yamada, and then began wondering why. Eventually, she clocked out and went to meet Yamada. As they began walking, she explained that she'd asked him to come because she wanted to give him a thank you meal. Yamada reminded her that he had asked her not to repay him for fixing her laptop, but Kino insisted that she wanted to, so he accepted the meal. When they got to the traffic stop, Kino's mind kept racing with questions, and she told herself that she shouldn't see Yamada in a romantic light. She was still talking to herself in her head when she suddenly sneezed, so she began searching her bag for a face mask. She was entirely focused on her task that she didn't notice she was about to get hit by someone riding a bike until Yamada pulled her towards him. The entire moment felt like a cliché romance scene, and it made Kino lose her ability to think for a few seconds. When she finally snapped out of it, she went back to searching for her mask. Once she found it and put it on, she turned to look at Yamada and saw that he didn't look affected by their unexpected moment. The next day, while Momoko and Kino were having a girls' day, a panicked Runa called Kino. She pleaded with Kino to meet her at the park as soon as possible, and Kino said that she would. Later, when Kino arrived at the park, Runa was sitting on a swing and looked perfectly fine, a contrast to how she had sounded on the phone. However, when she took the empty swing beside Runa, the girl's voice box activated, and she asked Kino if she'd read the message Ada sent to the group. Kino told her that she had, and Runa asked why she hadn't disputed it. Apparently, Ada's message was an announcement that they were getting a new guild member, and Runa didn't want that. This girl had a notebook in which she'd written a carefully thought-out plan to get rid of the new member, and she begged Kino to help her execute it. As expected, Kino refused, and Runa told her she was no different from Ada, who, by the way, had warned her not to play any tricks. As they talked some more, she revealed that their new guildmate was Yamada's friend from school, and Kino was surprised. She tried to learn more about this female friend of Yamada's, but Runa told her that she wasn't running an investigation business. However, she asked Kino for her phone and gave her Yamada's number, saying he was the only one who could answer her questions. Meanwhile, Yamada was at his prep school with Tsubaki and a friend, Okamoto, when Kino's call came in. Since he wasn't familiar with the number, he didn't pick up, so Okamoto teased him, saying he was avoiding his fangirls. On their way home later, Yamada decided to call Kino back and was surprised to learn that she was the one on the line. As they talked, Kino sneezed, and he grew worried, asking if she was feeling okay. She assured him that she was and said she would speak to him later, as she was running late for work. After the call disconnected, nosy Tsubaki asked who he'd been talking to, and Yamada told her it was his friend Akana. Tsubaki easily remembered Kino since she'd been there when Yamada called out to her during the school festival. Yamada then told her that she would eventually get to know her since she was their guildmate. Intrigued, Tsubaki asked what kind of person Kino was, and Yamada said he didn't know how to describe her. It turned out that the way he saw Kino had changed, and he wasn't sure if she was the same annoying girl he thought she was. The next day, during Runa's tutoring session with Yamada, Kino called to say she wouldn't log in later because she was sick. Runa advised her to get some rest, and after she hung up, she immediately told Yamada that Kino was ill. Later that day, Kino tried to drink some water, but she couldn't swallow it because her throat hurt. Despite that, she thought of taking some medicine to ease the pain, only to remember that she hadn't eaten all day. She tried calling Momoko to bring her something to eat, but Momoko didn't pick up, so she figured she could run to the convenience store and back by herself. Using her remaining energy, she got dressed and headed out into the night to where her bicycle was. When she tried to mount it, she fell, and that was when she realized that she shouldn't have left home in the first place. Deciding to return to her apartment, she tried to stand up, but couldn't since she was too weak. Thankfully, the universe was watching out for her and sent Yamada to come to her aid, but Kino assumed he was a figment of her imagination as she passed out in his arms. During that time, Tsubaki and Okamoto were trying to call Yamada since he was running late for class, but he didn't pick up. As a self-appointed court jester, Okamoto joked that Yamada wasn't answering their calls because he was in the middle of teaching a girl how to hit a high note. Tsubaki told him to stop flaunting his stupidity and said that Yamada wasn't the type to ignore his studies for anything, especially a girl. Okamoto argued that people change and advised her to make a move on Yamada before another girl snatched him up. Surprisingly, Tsubaki didn't tell him to shut up and said she knew she could lose Yamada to someone else. She then burst into tears, leaving Okamoto confused about what to do. Like almost every girl in Yamada's life, Tsubaki had a crush on him. However, her crush hadn't developed at first sight. The first time she approached Yamada, it was because of a game they had played online against one another. Tsubaki believed Yamada had cheated and asked him to let her observe his gameplay, which he did since he didn't have anything to hide. After the game, she apologized for her wrongful accusation, and that was how they became friends. As time passed, she witnessed so many girls confess to Yamada and get rejected, which motivated her to never catch feelings for him. One day, her curiosity pushed her to ask Yamada why he never accepted anyone's confession. Yamada said it was because he didn't share their feelings, so she asked if there was someone he liked, and he said no. Bro said he'd avoided catching feelings for anyone after what happened with the girl who first confessed to him. The girl in question used to be bullied a lot, and as a result, she often skipped school. Their teacher used to send Yamada to her house after school to drop off her assignments and notes, so she got used to him. When she began attending school again, the bullies picked up where they left off. Out of the goodness of his heart, Yamada started defending her and stayed by her side all the time. One day, she asked if he would remain at her side forever, and he told her he could not. His response made her realize that he was only being nice to her and nothing more, so she began to cry. He figured he'd apologize the next day when he saw her, but he learned that she'd transferred schools and he never saw her again. Ever since then, he has always thought of her and wondered whether things would have been different if he had responded differently. Because of the never-ending stream of what-ifs, he began to feel uncomfortable around girls and started rejecting their confessions without a second thought. After hearing his story, Tsubaki reminded herself once more that falling for Yamada wasn't an option. However, she still fell, and it hurt. Returning to the present, Yamada had taken Kino back to her apartment and tried to give her some water. The water didn't get past her throat and ended up pouring on her pillow, so he changed it. He then tried to cool her down with a wet cloth, but when he realized it wasn't working, he rushed her to the emergency room. Hours later, Kino woke up in her bed and wondered how she'd gotten back to her apartment. When she got out of bed to get something, she noticed the sleeping Yamada and was shocked. Suddenly, she felt hot, so she opened the balcony door to let some air in. But the cold air woke Yamada up. He immediately stood up and went to close it when he noticed Kino standing in front of it because the cold air wasn't good for her. Just then, she sneezed, so he got her some tissues to wipe her snot with and sat with her until she finished. Kino tried to move away from him for fear that she'd make him sick, but Yamada told her to relax and sit back down. Once she complied, he explained that he'd been on his way to check on her after tutoring Runa when he found her almost passed out by the bike racks. His words made her realize that she hadn't been tripping earlier. However, she became overwhelmed and burst into tears when she realized that he'd been the one to nurse her back to health. Seeing her cry made Yamada worry, but she explained that they were tears of gratitude and nothing more. When she finally stopped crying, he gave her some yogurt to eat, and she happily finished it before passing the cup to him to dispose of. The next moment, one of her legs started cramping because of the way she had placed it, so she cried out in pain. Yamada instructed her to strengthen her leg so he could look at it, but Kino refused, as the pain was unbearable. Seeing this, Yamada pushed her blanket aside and got into bed with her, but Kino still refused to let him touch her leg. She began kicking the unhurt one in the air, hoping he'd back, but Bro's Ultra Instinct was turned on, and he easily dodged her attacks. When he finally helped her ease the pain in her leg, he told her she was a gutless wimp, and the embarrassed girl thanked him for his help. However, Yamada didn't respond and kept staring at her, which left her feeling a bit self-conscious. Before she could question him, he reached out his hand, so she backed away in surprise and accidentally hit her head. When she saw that it was the yogurt spoon he was reaching for, she realized she had overreacted. Surprisingly, Yamada laughed at her, which embarrassed her, so she complained and told him to stop teasing her. The following morning, as Yamada prepared to leave, Kino thanked him for being her personal nurse, and he told her not to sweat it. When he got up to leave, she grabbed hold of his jacket, so he turned to ask what she wanted. Kino quickly let go of him and apologized, saying it was a mistake, so Yamada just stared at her. Feeling embarrassed, she told him to head to school and not to worry about her, so he complied. Sometime after he left, Momoko arrived with groceries and a heartfelt apology to Kino for failing to pick up and return her calls. Seeing as Kino was the reincarnation of Mother Teresa, she accepted Momoko's apology. As they put away the groceries, she revealed that Yamada had taken care of her all night. Momoko hadn't expected this, so she asked Kino if she and Yamada were already dating. Kino said they weren't, and Momoko was even more surprised, because, as far as she was concerned, no guy would go to such lengths for a girl he had no feelings for. She suspected that Kino hadn't figured this out yet and decided to wait until she was fully recovered to talk about it with her. After spending some time with Kino, it was time for Momoko to leave, but before she did, she cryptically told Kino that when it came to love, timing was everything. Her words made Kino think, but they also made her wonder when Momoko would become as wise as Master Uwe. Afterwards, she made some food for herself, and while she was studying, Yamada replied to the text she had sent him earlier. The message was straightforward as usual, and Kino told herself that she had to find a way to thank him properly when she was fully recovered. Just then, a text from Runa came in, and since Kino had been absent-minded, the notification ping almost made her drop her phone. Runa wanted to know how she was feeling and promised to log into the game that weekend so they could play together. Kino was deeply touched by the younger girl's concern, but wondered if she logged into the game yesterday and had already met Tsubaki. Seeing as she was bored, she decided to log in and was happy to see that Rurihime was online. After they exchanged greetings, Rurihime introduced her to Tsubaki, and Kino invited them to go hunting with her. Tsubaki was reluctant to agree, but they convinced her to change her mind by saying it would be a good way to brush up on her skills. Kino also promised to show her a few tricks she'd learned. At the hunting ground, Rurihime ditched the girls, leaving them to sit under a tree and completely ignoring them as they were being cooked. The fight made Tsubaki realize that Kino was far from being a gamer girl, even though she'd been playing the game for a while. The only reason they managed to fight the monster for long was that Rurihime kept healing them each time they were on the verge of death. At one point, they began pressing all the buttons they could, hoping that they would somehow unlock a new skill, but that never happened. In the end, the monster left to find real gamers, but Kino wasn't the least bit discouraged by it. She began discussing what she'd observed during the fight, believing it would be helpful the next time, and Tsubaki gave her own insights. A little while later, Kino logged out, leaving Tsubaki with Rurihime, who offered to fix her armor. In the real world, Kino called Yamada and began telling him about her exciting hunting mission with Tsubaki. She also asked him for pointers so she would know what to do the next time she encountered the monster, and he gave them. They kept talking for hours, and just before hanging up, Kino told Yamada she was glad she got to hear his voice. As soon as the call ended, Kino's hands began shaking because she realized the gravity of what she'd said. Before she could start panicking, she called Momoko and said she had something important to discuss. Momoko was convinced it had something to do with Yamada, so she didn't want to hear it over the phone and suggested they meet in person once Kino was fully recovered. A week later, they met at a cafe, and Momoko's excitement vanished when Kino brought up Takuma. Unwilling to discuss a cheater on an empty stomach, she called a waiter over and gave him their orders. After the waiter left, she faced Kino and said she was disappointed in her for still being hung up on someone who dumped her without a second thought. Kino assured Momoko that her feelings for Takuma were gone, but explained that she couldn't move on because she was afraid of being dumped again. Apparently, she believed she was the problem and wanted to know exactly what she'd done to make him leave. Hearing this, Momoko felt sorry for Kino, but clarified that she hadn't been the problem. She also said Takuma couldn't keep it in his pants because he was a greedy fool. Just then, two guys walked into the cafe, and when they saw the girls, they made a beeline for their table, completely ignoring the waitress who tried to attend to them. Momoko's mood instantly shifted when she saw the guys, because she'd met them once on a group date and learned they didn't understand the meaning of personal space. She instructed Kino to ignore them, but the guys were too thick-skinned to realize that the girls didn't want them around. They kept trying to talk to Kino and Momoko, which made them very uncomfortable, but they were too nice to tell them off. Fortunately, the waiter arrived with their orders, and when Kino looked up, she was surprised to see it was Ada. Ada then calmly asked the guys who they were, and they answered that they were old friends of Kino and Momoko. However, the waitress, who they had ignored earlier, told Ada what happened before he arrived. Understanding the situation, Ada asked the guys to take another table, but they refused, so Ada dropped the nice guy act and repeated his statement firmly. Realizing they could be beaten up or kicked out, the guys agreed to switch tables immediately. Once they were gone, Ada went back to being himself and left the girls to enjoy their meal, but Momoko wasn't interested in doing that. She asked Kino how she knew Ada, and Kino said he was her guildmate. Upon hearing this, Momoko began wondering if she should set her sights on gamer guys since the two she'd met so far were demigods. That evening, after Ada got off work, he was surprised to find Momoko and Kino waiting for him. He jokingly asked if they wanted to hit on him, but Kino told him to dream on and explained that she had something important to discuss with him. Following her statement, the three of them went to a park, but Kino didn't say anything for a long time. Tired of waiting for her to stop being a wimp, Momoko blurted out that Kino was having love issues. Kino couldn't help but feel embarrassed, but Ada was grateful to Momoko for speeding things up. He told Kino that she didn't have to tell him who she was in love with because he already knew, but she begged him not to say the name. Momoko then explained to Ada that Kino was currently in her feelings because of her stupid ex. Since Ada already knew the story of how she got dumped, Kino just told him the same thing she told Momoko before those walking mistakes interrupted them. After listening to her, the ever-wise Ada advised Kino to grab the bull by the horns and confess to Yamada. He said the worst thing that could happen was that she'd get rejected, and if that happened, he and Momoko would be on standby to help her pick up the pieces of her broken heart. Kino felt it was a crazy idea, but realized it was the best option for her, so she rushed off to find Yamada. Ida and Momoko remained where they were, and when Momoko tried to hit on him, he shut her down faster than the speed of light. A little while later, Kino arrived at Yamada's apartment, and while she was trying to catch her breath, he opened the door. Surprised, he asked why she had come, but just as she was about to respond, two senior citizens began greeting each other at the top of their voices. A dog also started barking, making it impossible for Kino to gather her thoughts properly. Seeing this, Yamada suggested that they talk on the way to the train station because he had prep school to attend. Kino agreed and remained standing at the door so he could grab his stuff. However, he caused her heart to skip several beats when he suddenly reached behind her to shut the door. Kino remained frozen when he walked away, but as soon as she saw his shirt come off, she immediately turned away. Shortly after setting her insides on fire, Yamada got dressed, and they left for the train station. During the walk there, Kino began having second thoughts and wondered whether it was a good idea to risk their friendship on her feelings. She was completely lost and thought that she almost walked into oncoming traffic and had to be saved by Yamada. He then asked if she was doing okay, but Kino was too shocked to respond. Realizing what was happening, Yamada took her hand and began leading her to their destination when the walk signal came on. A little while later, they arrived outside the station. Ann and Yamada apologized that they never got to discuss what she wanted to discuss with him. Kino assured him that it was fine and said they could talk about it when he was free. He then turned to leave, but when he noticed the look in her eyes, he promised to call her after his classes ended. Shortly after they parted, it started raining heavily, and the rain didn't show any signs of stopping by the time Yamada's classes were over. When Akamoto learned that Yamada had an umbrella, he asked him if they could share it, and Yamada agreed. However, he decided to relinquish his spot to Tsubaki because he wanted to play Cupid. Tsubaki didn't want to, but Okamoto pulled her aside and told her not to waste the chance he was giving her, or she'd regret it. As she and Yamada walked to the station, he noticed that she was getting rained on, so he gave her the umbrella and ran off. Tsubaki tried to chase after him, but accidentally bumped into someone and fell to the ground. Her glasses also fell off her face, so she began crawling around to find them. She wasn't successful, but Yamada, who had returned, found them and gave them to her. The only problem was that they were broken, but Tsubaki still wore them anyway, since they were better than her normal eyes. As she stared up at him, she became entranced and suddenly blurted out that she liked him. The embarrassment and shock that followed her confession caused her to drop the umbrella and cover her mouth, but Yamada didn't say anything. He simply picked the umbrella back up, and Tsubaku started crying because she felt stupid and overwhelmed. As she cried, she apologized for springing her confession on him but pleaded with him to think it over for at least a day before responding. Later, Yamada texted Kino, saying he was tired and would talk to her another day. The next day, during his tutoring session with Runa, Ada walked in like he owned the place and sat on the bed. He then asked Yamada if anyone had confessed to him, and Yamada, thinking he was referring to Tsubaki, asked how he found it. Ada claimed that he had his ways and asked Yamada how he responded to the confession. Yamada said he was still thinking things over, which surprised Ada, so he advised him not to take too long. According to him, doing that was the same thing as toying with the girl's feelings. Later in the evening, Kino's coworker informed her that Yamada was loitering outside the store, so she went to speak with him. The first thing she noticed was that he looked troubled, but she didn't say anything and let him explain that he tried calling before he came. Kino apologized, told him her phone had died, and finally asked why he looked like a sad puppy. Yamada claimed it was due to studying, but Kino knew it was a lie. Instead of trying to make him admit it, she changed the topic of discussion to the new sword she'd acquired in the game. When Yamada asked what kind of sword it was, she asked for his hand and began drawing on it with a marker. After finishing her masterpiece, she told Yamada that she liked him better when he acted all mysterious like Sasuke. Yamada understood what she meant, so he admitted he didn't know how to talk about his feelings with anyone because he feared saying the wrong thing and being judged. Despite this admission, he felt compelled to be more open with Kino. He told her he couldn't help but feel worthless because he couldn't comprehend basic human emotions and was always misunderstood. Kino assured him that there was nothing wrong with him and said that even if others didn't see his worth, she and all his friends did. She also urged him to be nicer to himself because he was the kindest-hearted person she'd ever met. That night, Tsubaki left home in a daze and went to wait for Yamada in the spot where she had confessed to him the previous night. The moment he arrived, she knew he'd come to turn her down, but she wasn't sad. So when he told her that he couldn't accept her feelings, she replied that she hadn't expected him to. Seeing no need to hide things anymore, she opened up to him about her feelings and how long she had them. She also gave him reasons why she fell for him and a whole bunch of other things she liked about him. After pouring her heart out, she started crying and told him that she didn't regret loving him. Moved by her honesty, the normally emotionless boy felt tears well up in his eyes and quickly wiped them away to maintain his reputation. At that moment, Tsubaki noticed the drawing on his hand and asked who the artist was. Yamada told her it was his friend, but Tsubaki knew it was Kino, and she told him so. When she mentioned that Kino was also the person he liked, Yamada went quiet for a few seconds before admitting that he did indeed like Kino, and this caused Tsubaki to open her floodgates again. However, she thanked him for not treating her the way he had treated the other girls who had confessed to him in the past. She then told him that she was going home, but because her glasses were broken, she walked right into a vending machine. Worried that she might walk into something more life-threatening, Yamada asked if she needed help getting home, and Tsubaki told him that she didn't because she had been embarrassed enough for one night. Yamada had no choice but to watch her leave, and when she was far away from him, she let her remaining tears fall. Days later, the guild members had another get-together, and when Kino arrived at the location, she noticed that Yamada wasn't there. As she began wondering where he was, Ada moved closer to her and said that Yamada would come later because he was running some errands. He then asked if she wanted him to help her arrange a one-on-one meeting with Yamada, but she told him not to worry. As they walked inside to confirm their reservation, she told Ada that Yamada seemed stressed lately. When she mentioned that it was probably because of his exams, Ada told her that she was wrong and walked away. Soon, they arrived at the front of their private dining room, and as Kamada told them the place belonged to his friend, someone called out to him. The man was dressed in an expensive-looking suit and greeted Komodo with such respect that the girls began wondering whether Komodo was secretly a mob boss. Some other well-dressed patrons also came out to greet Komodo, and after he answered all of them, their group went into their private dining room. While they ate, Kino declared that the meat was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Kamada agreed and expressed sadness that Tsubaki couldn't join them for the evening. Ada explained that she was busy, and Runa said she was glad Tsubaki wasn't around since she still hadn't accepted her in their guild. Just then, some of the restaurant staff came in with wine and more food, and explained that Komoda's friends sent them over. Hearing this, Ada told Komoda that he wanted to be like him in the future. Komoda brushed his statement aside and began talking about the game, so Runa butted into the conversation and proved once again that she was a brat. A little while later, Yamada arrived, and the moment he stepped into the dining room, Runa rushed over to him. She told him that she was in trouble at the same time Ada and Komoda began talking, so Yamada couldn't understand what they were trying to tell him. Suddenly, they all went quiet, and Runa's expression changed to one of horror as they heard Kino's voice getting closer to the room. Yamada tried to ask why, but a drunk Kino suddenly latched onto him and began spouting a whole lot of nonsense. It so happened that she'd finished the entire bottle of wine and started treating Runa as her personal doll, so Runa took her to the bathroom and left her there. She told Yamada he could do the same, but Yamada wasn't as cruel as she was and decided to take Kino home instead. Before leaving, he apologized to Komoda for not sitting down to enjoy the meal he bought for them, and Komoda assured him that it was fine. Outside, Yamada got water from a vending machine and pressed it to Kino's cheek to wake her up. She jolted awake because of the sudden contact and asked how he knew she wanted water. Yamada reminded her that she was singing a song about it as they walked, so he stopped to get her some. Feeling embarrassed, she apologized for all the inconvenience she had caused him and pulled out her phone to write a memo to remind herself not to drink. Yamada told her to do that when she got home, as it was already late, so she put the phone away. She then told him that he should head home, but Yamada said he wouldn't leave her on her own because there were a lot of drunk people around. He offered her his hand, and after she took it, he began leading her through the crowd of people. At some point, Kino's heel got stuck in between the cracks in the ground, so Yamada bent down to remove it and put the shoe back on for her. When he got back up, he retook her hand, and they continued walking to her apartment. Soon, they arrived there, and after Kino thanked Yamada for walking her home, she took out her keys. When she moved to unlock the door, he began walking away, but she suddenly rushed to stop him and asked if he had feelings for her. To her surprise, he didn't deny it and said he hadn't expected her to catch on as quickly as she had. Kino was in disbelief, so he promised he would call her in the morning and repeat what he'd said so she would know it wasn't a dream. Before he finally took his leave, he hugged her, and all of Kino's worries melted away. The following morning, he kept his promise and called her, and Kino was pleased. When she got to school later, she happily shared the news with Momoko, who congratulated her for finally bagging a real man. After class, they had lunch with a classmate, and when the girl heard about Kino's relationship, she congratulated her. However, she warned that things wouldn't be easy, seeing as Kino was older, and everything she said worried Kino. When she met Yamada later that day, her mind kept racing with questions, and she tried to act as her classmate had advised her to. When she tried to tell Yamada something, the boy got carried away staring at her teeth, and when she realized it, she became embarrassed. Yamada told her there was nothing to be embarrassed about because she had perfect teeth. After leaving the cafe, they began walking to Kino's apartment, but Yamada noticed that she kept glancing at him. Curious, he asked if she was mesmerized by his face card, and she told him that she wanted them to hold hands. Yamada had no problem with this, and after taking her hand in his, he told her never to hesitate to tell him the things she wanted from him. As they continued walking, Yamada thought back to the first time they met. Tea and women were still a mystery to him. You think Momoko will ever get a boyfriend, or is she destined to keep going on group dates? That's all for today's video, and if you got this far, let's confuse the comment reader by typing simp. Also, check out this next video.